Hey, what's up humans? Hardleg Joe here with the profile for my Fluffle/Frightfur OTK deck, which is pretty standard all things considered. If you already know how to play this archetype, you won't find anything too spicy in here. But if you've never played with possessed toys before and you'd like to know how they work in 2021, this should be a solid beginner's guide. To start with, let's go over our deck list. For monsters, we're playing 3 Corone, 3 Comrade Pengu, 2 Flippers, Taste the Chain, some Care Bears, a Skizzers, 3 Calliopes, and 1 each of Hooters, Kanata, Squidward, Okayo, and some wings with gloves. I don't know who has a stuffed animal like this, but I guess you do you. Anyway, for spells, we've got 1 each of Miracle Fusion, but fluffy, 3 of the Old School Polymerization, 3 of the second best Searcher in the game, 3 Good Foolish Burials, an amazing Extendo Brick, and 3 Advantage Machines. Our only trap is 3 of this generic filler card that you can honestly replace with anything you want, really. As for the extra deck, we've got Free Willy 2, Ice Age 2, Clash of the Titans, The Wolfman, Life of Pi, Babe, some movie with a trumpet mech in it, Plan B, XC Summons 101, The Link Thief, a bird, a not bird, and a ball. As for the side deck, I'll go over this later, but it's mostly cards you want to side in if you're going first, because this is a blind second deck designed to OTK the opponent. You accomplish this by fusion summoning a lot. The fusions are called Frightfurs, and we have a whole toolbox of ones we can make. The most important ones, though, are Tiger, Wolf, Kraken, and Big Tiger. Tiger and Wolf both require Edge Imp Sabres and any number of Fluffle monsters. You can just use 1 Fluffle, but both of these gain effects by using multiple. Wolf can attack a number of times equal to the amount of materials used, which means if you make him using Sabers and like 3 other Fluffles, this can attack 4 times, dealing 8,000 damage and winning the game on its own. Assuming you have an open field, of course. Tiger helps with that. When it's summoned, you can target cards on the field equal to the number of fusion materials used and destroy them. So by default, you're going to be able to pop at least 2 cards, but if you make this with 4 or more monsters, then you can destroy 4 or more cards. It also gives all your Frightfurs 300 attack for every Fluffle or Frightfur you control, which can really add up if you summon a whole field full of fusions. Which you often do thanks to Saber Tiger. This thing requires a Frightfur fusion monster, plus any number of Fluffle or Edge Imp monsters. Like the other ones, you can make it with just 2 materials, but if you use 3, then it can't be destroyed by battle or card effects, which is decent protection. It also gives all Frightfurs a 400 attack boost, which is not much, but it can really add up when you combine it with Tiger's effect. Most importantly, though, when this is summoned, you can summon a fusion monster from your graveyard, which essentially means whatever Frightfur you use as material is going to come right back. This is a key thing to remember when looking at Frightfur Kraken. This 2200 beater can be made with any Fluffle and any Edge Imp monster, and it has 2 effects. First, it can attack twice per turn. Nice. Second effect is, once per turn, you can target a monster your opponent controls and send it to the graveyard. But if you do, this card can't attack directly this turn. The key thing about that second effect is that it's what we call a soft once per turn, which means if you have 2 copies of this card, they can each use their effect once per turn. A nice quirk of this wording is that if this card goes to the graveyard and then gets summoned back again, like what happens with Saber Tiger, then the revived monster is essentially treated as a new copy of this card, allowing you to use that effect again. This also means that if you use Kraken's effect to get rid of something, fuse it away, then revive it, that revived Kraken will be able to attack directly, because it was the previous version that got restricted. This is really convenient because if you have an open field, Kraken, with its double attack, plus Saber Tiger giving everyone a 400 attack boost, is exactly 8,000 damage, giving you a second route to OTK. And that's really the core of the deck. You have Tiger and Kraken as removal, and then you finish things off either by making Wolf or by swarming with Saber Tigers. If you can get all 3 of your Tigers on the field, which is not uncommon, their combined attack boosts will put the Saber Tigers over 4,000 attack, letting them beat over pretty much anything you can't target with the removal. And if you find something you can't target or attack over, then we have things like Dingirsu and Underworld Goddess, who have non-targeting, non-destruction removal, as well as Baguska, who can just move things to defense position, so you can hopefully attack over them then. As for how to actually make all these fusions, it's not too difficult, but it's not exactly linear either. Like, I can't give you any exact combos, because Fluffles are what I like to call a puzzle deck. There's a lot of different ways you can reach the end board that you want, and several different end boards you can get. It all depends on what you have in your hand. So playing this deck is like a puzzle, where every game you're trying to find a solution using the pieces you have at your disposal. Fortunately, Fluffles have a ton of search power, draw power, and recycling to help them get as many puzzle pieces as possible. Oftentimes, you can go through half your deck in a single turn, and at the heart of that is Toy Vendor. This continuous spell has 2 effects. First, if it's sent to the grave, you can search any Fluffle monster or Edge Imp Sabres. This is why we play 3 Foolish Burial Goods, because it can send Toy Vendor straight to the deck and search most of the archetype. Its second effect is once per turn, you can discard a card, draw a card, and show it to your opponent. If it's a Fluffle, then not only do you get to keep it, but you also get to summon any monster from your hand. If it's not a Fluffle, then you just discard it to the graveyard. This is great because not only are you drawing through the deck, but most of our Fluffles have some effect when summoned from the hand, and a few of our non-Fluffle cards have effects when they hit the graveyard, so most of the time, you're going to get some benefit from using this. This is why we're not playing a ton of tech cards, by the way. You could remove some of these Fluffles in favor of Gammas, or Triple T, or Forbidden Droplet. All 3 are great in this deck. It's just that the less Fluffles you play, the less likely your Toy Vendor will hit something useful. It's also worth noting that, once again, all the effects on Toy Vendor are soft once per turns, which means you can send all 3 vendors to the grave in one turn and get 3 searches. If you get multiple Toy Vendors on the field, you can use each of them once per turn. And if you send it to the graveyard and then bring it back, you can use it again. Fluffle Dolphin does exactly that, letting you set a Toy Vendor from your graveyard while sending a Fluffle or a Sabers to the graveyard. We play this at 2 because it's a really good effect, but only if you already have a Toy Vendor in the grave. Half the time it's dead first turn, so I don't think you want it at 3, but it's also really useful, so you want to play it at more than 1. Dolphin also has an effect which activates when it's sent to the graveyard as fusion material. It lets you target a polymerization in the graveyard and shuffle it back into the deck, which is some nice recycling. Many of the Fluffles have effects like this, effects which trigger when you fuse them together. These are useful on their own, of course, but they're also good because they help you chain block. Chain blocking is a quirk of the rules that happens when multiple effects go off at the same time. For instance, if you fusion summon Tiger using Fluffle Dolphin, Tiger's effect to destroy and Dolphin's effect to shuffle Poly back will both happen at the same time, which means they form a chain, and you get to decide the order of that chain. This is important because many negation effects can only respond to the last thing on a chain. So if you put Tiger first and then Dolphin second, your opponent won't be able to negate Tiger, allowing the destruction to go through. Depending on what your opponent is playing, this may be very useful, and you can take advantage of it by picking fusion materials that will block for your Frightfurs. We have quite a few that can do that. In addition to Dolphin, we have Cat, which allows you to add a polymerization from graveyard to hand. Octo lets you return 2 banished monsters to your graveyard, which will make more sense later. And Penguin lets you draw 2, discard 1. This doesn't seem like much, but there's a reason we play it at 3. Not only is the draw power a great addition to this deck, but the discard lets you pitch Toy Vendor, or Edge Imp Chain for extra searches. Chain lets you search any Frightfur card when it's sent to the graveyard. We only have 2 Frightfur cards in the main deck, both spells, but they are easily some of the most powerful cards we play. One is Frightfur Fusion, which lets you fusion summon by banishing monsters from the graveyard. This can be key for closing out games, allowing you to easily make a wolf or a tiger with 5 or more materials after you've already comboed off. The other card is Frightfur Patchwork, which lets you search any Edge Imp monster along with Polymerization. This is amazing because pretty much all our plays require 3 cards, a Fluffle, an Edge Imp, and Polymerization. So having one card that searches 2 of those 3 parts is super useful. That's why we play Chain at 3. If you fuse with it, or discard it with Toy Vendor, or discard it with Penguin's Effect, then you can get Patchwork and start going to town. Or if you already have Patchwork, you can get Frightfur Fusion and have a game-ending threat in hand. Our remaining 3 of cards are Fluffle Dog, who searches any Fluffle or the Scissors when it's summoned, Fluffle Bear, who you can discard in order to activate a Toy Vendor from the deck, and Edge Imp Scythe, which I'll explain later because it's kind of an anomaly. For now, though, you can hopefully see why this deck can play so many one-of monsters. Not only do we have a ton of draw power, but Dog and Vendor both search everything, and are themselves searchable by other cards, meaning we can afford to play a bunch of situational tech cards and then search them whenever we need them. For example, Fluffle Owl. When it's summoned, you can search Polymerization, or if you're out of Polymerizations, it can pay 500 life points to let you fusion summon without it. Now you can usually find your way to Poly without using Owl, but if you can't get to it, it's nice to have a searchable way to fix that problem. Angel is another nice one-of. It's a pendulum monster, and once per turn, while it's in the pendulum scale, you can summon a Fluffle or Edge Imp from the graveyard, which can let you recycle or reuse any of the Fluffle effects that you might need. Perhaps the best one-of, though, is Fluffle Wings, which offers amazing draw power, assuming you have the proper setup. Basically, if it's in the graveyard and you have Toy Vendor on the field, then you can banish both Wings and another Fluffle to draw 2 cards, and destroy Toy Vendor, which will get you an additional search. It's essentially a +3, which is amazing, but it's a hard once per turn, meaning you can only do this once per turn, even if you get more than 1 Wings in the graveyard, which is why we only play it at 1. Some lists I saw played this at 2 or even 3 so they could do better in the grind game, but I find that you usually win in 1 turn anyway, and if you do need to grind, then we have Octo's Effect, which I'll remind you can shuffle Wings and another Fluffle back into the graveyard so they can use them on a future turn. All that leaves then is Scythe, which is our newest Fluffle support, and aside from Imperm, the only disruption we have on the opponent's turn. This thing is actually a hand trap that lets you fusion during the opponent's main phase without using Polymerization. Using Scythe and any Fluffle, you can easily make Frightfur Whale, which has 2 effects. First, when it's summoned, you can target a card on each side of the field and destroy them. Which seems like it would mean sacrificing Whale to pop a card, but Scythe actually helps with that. It has a second effect that says if it's in the graveyard and a Frightfur would be destroyed, you can banish this instead, allowing you to keep your fish. Whale's second effect is a quick effect, which lets you send 1 Frightfur card from your deck or extra deck to the graveyard in order to target a fusion monster and have it gain attack equal to half its original attack. In the case of just having Whale, it can use its effect on itself to go up to 3,900 attack, letting it withstand pretty much anything. Using this on your opponent's turn can slow them down enough to allow you to break through on your turn. It may seem a little odd playing some quick effect disruption on a go second OTK deck, but I found that using this can usually slow down the opponent enough to allow you to easily break through on your turn. And if you do, then having the extra 2,600 beater that can then boost things by 1,000 attack can really help seal the deal. In addition, its effect to send a Frightfur to the grave is pretty useful, namely because it can send our last tech card, Frightfur Repair. In the hand, this is nearly useless, but if it's in the graveyard, you can banish it to summon a Fluffle or Edge Imp from your hand, giving you that extra little bit of extension that you sometimes need in order to OTK. And that's pretty much the deck. There's a few other Fluffle effects I didn't mention, but they aren't really key to your plays, and any extra deck monsters I didn't mention are just generic tools that can be replaced with anything, really. As for the side deck, mostly it's just other options to replace Imperm with, other things you might want to swap out the Fluffles for if you like to live dangerously. Not sure if I'd actually side these though, they're more just alternatives to consider if you want some more powerful but also more expensive cards. Speaking of alternatives to consider though, greater polymerization can only be used to fuse monsters with 3 or more materials, but it gives them bonus effects, which might make OTKing a lot easier. It's not searchable like regular poly though, so I'm not sure if it's worth it, but there is potential there. Finally, there's just a few other extra deck monsters, things you can tech in if your opponent makes you go first. I was going to explain all of them in detail, but this video is already long enough, and I think I might make a separate deck list for go first Fluffles in the near future, which would contain all of that information, so make sure you subscribe if you want to see that. For now though, I think I'm going to call it here. Like the video if you liked it, comment if there's any changes you would like to make, and consider checking out my Patreon if you want to support the show. Even just $1 helps. Anyway, thanks for watching, and until next time, good luck and have fun.